Hello, this is Captain Aquarius, welcoming you to Aquarian Airlines Flight 82117, which is about to fly from the departure point of your choice to Mount Shasta, California, and then eastward across the path of the much anticipated and dreaded total solar eclipse of August 21st, 2017. This event has been called extremely rare. It is and it is not. Total solar eclipses occur every few years. This one is unusual in superficial terms because it will be the first total solar eclipse since 1918 to cross over the entire breadth of the continental United States, from Oregon to South Carolina. But it is very rare in energetic terms because of the brilliant astrodynamics that accompany the eclipse and make it a very exceptional opportunity. A total solar eclipse is a simple event in which a moon crosses over and occludes, that is, she hides, the face of the sun for a few minutes from the vantage point of a person standing in the path of totality. With this eclipse, as with any solar eclipse, the point of interest and debate is not in the physical event itself, but in our emotional reactions to it, especially among people who have a default setting of fear toward anything new or unusual. Your best starting point for the basics about the eclipse may be Donna Woodward's superb article, What Astrologers See in an Eclipse That You Don't. Ms. Woodward begins by dismissing at once the fake fear premise inevitably spewed at us by corporatist mainstream media that, quote, astrologers are freaking out, end quote, about the eclipse. We are most assuredly not freaking out, as you know very well if you actually know an astrologer and you understand how the best of us operate in liberating others from fear and not putting them deeper into it. The fear response, though, is ancient and understandable. Since Shang Dynasty China and Old Kingdom Egypt, that is, well before 2000 BC, astronomers could predict eclipses. Emperors and pharaohs rewarded those who could nail the calculations exactly and might shorten, by the loss of their heads, those who didn't see an eclipse coming or otherwise got it wrong. Why, we wonder? Did an eclipse have any real impact on the country's food supply, its economy, or its security? No, not at all. But it was surely in the ruler's interest to know when the people of his country may be paralyzed by fear and the old superstitions about how an eclipse is an omen of doom, or a royal child born during an eclipse will grow up to bring disaster to the realm, or an eclipse on the eve of a battle could be a dire portent, especially for the invading army. The Egyptians imagined that at a solar eclipse, the primordial serpent Apep swallowed the bark bearing the scarab Keter, the emerging sun. The Chinese believed the sun was being devoured by a dragon, and they and others would beat metal pots and drums to drive it away. Some Native Americans saw the devouring monster as a huge black bear. The German tribes of Julius Caesar's time saw an enormous black pig. Hindu people and many others saw a black demon. The main idea was that the Sun Eater was huge, black, and with the possible exception of the dragon, anything but auspicious or heroic. We wonder why these beliefs lasted so long, especially when we know now how an eclipse will always go. Our old friend the sun, minding his business up there, suddenly gets covered by some black thing so huge and so fast that within minutes there's nothing left of his radiance but a thin, wispy corona of light around the edge. And then, After only a couple of minutes, the round black whatever it is moves on, and the sun is just as he was before. It's the same thing every time. You'd think, as Sam Giancana put it, that they'd catch on and figure out that the thing that was covering the sun was our other old friend, the moon. How come it took us so long to get it? We can well understand why, given that in ancient and medieval times, people might see or hear of one solar eclipse in their lifetimes, and would have no idea that all solar eclipses are basically the same. Modern photography and communications did not begin to tie the peoples of the world together in the same experiences until the mid-19th century, when we had modern astronomy and Victor Hugo wrote that nations, like stars, are entitled to eclipse. All is well, provided the light returns and the eclipse does not become endless night. Dawn and resurrection are synonymous. The appearance of the light is the same as the survival of the soul. Perhaps it took medieval and early modern Europe a very long time to see eclipses this way, because popes and prelates maintained control by keeping people immobile, illiterate, and terrified by everything from the Black Death to the Turk to the trump of doom, the devil, and hell, while the church burned as heretics and witches anyone who would not conform and quake in fear of eternal damnation. Eclipses were not always something to dread. The Greek philosopher and astronomer Thales of Miletos predicted the solar eclipse of May 28th in 585 BC. It coincided with the end of the war between Lydians and Medes, and proved that an eclipse may well signify a happy outcome, not a disaster. The eclipse of January 27, 632 AD, came precisely at the death of Ibrahim, the beloved little son of the prophet Mohammed, peace be upon him. The grief-stricken father refused to interpret the eclipse as a sign of suffering and woe, but insisted instead that eclipses declare the might and majesty of Allah. One thing is certain, that an eclipse announces a moment of change, and possibly for much the better. The question that comes at this point is not whether the August 21st eclipse is a harbinger of famine or flood, fire or plague, economic collapse, murder and terror, and catastrophic earth changes, and the final dump of doom that is now on the lips of every media whore and panic pimp at every minute. All together now, World War III. The question, rather, is whether this eclipse is in fact the exact opposite of what all the dreadmongers are trying to scare us about. The fact is that this eclipse is exactly what we can expect now. The closer we get to the moment of truth, our long-destined breakthrough into spiritual consciousness and freedom, the more the controlling archons must play every fear card they can find. Old ones, new ones, black hole cards unimaginable until now, to keep us from seeing things as they are. What are the archons most afraid that we'll see? Not their crimes, the endless wars and financial shell games, the vaccines that aim to fight new viruses that are about to be created in the laboratories of the death culture, the child sacrifice and blood transfusion rites that make pedophile priests look like choir boys, the poisoning of the earth for profit, the corruption of the human spirit and enslavement of the mind by conformist, dumbed-down consumer pop culture, the eugenic master plan to depopulate the earth by 90% and turn the world into a two-tier master and helot society of wealthy, almighty archons and the managers, physicians, guards, cooks and waiters, porters and drivers, and sex slaves who live at their master's pleasure and die at their slightest whim. No, the controllers aren't afraid we'll find out about these things and the rest of the horrors they've done and still do. All of these things are well known. And more of the toxic, lurid details are coming out all the time. It's all in plain sight. The only thing that prevents us from acting on what we know is that the archons have kept us so intimidated and ignorant, so exhausted and misinformed, divided and distracted, that we can't possibly come together to take action. At least not yet. The controllers know they're safe until we find out the thing that they're really afraid we'll see. They're afraid, they're terrified that we shall see ourselves as we truly are, not as stupid, corrupt, vicious self-servers driven only by our lust to feed, fuck, fight, and forget everyone but ourselves, as shown here, for example, in this week's white nationalist troubles in Charlottesville, Virginia. Rather, the archons are afraid we'll see, at very long last, what we truly are: magnificent, powerful beings, fully capable of bearing any hardship and making any sacrifice, of giving to others in generosity, creativity, and beauty, of achieving union with the divine, because that's who and what we are. And it's time for the wandering hero, mired and misdirected for much too long in the illusion of his own unworthiness, to come home. How do these possibilities show in the August 21st eclipse chart cast for Mount Shasta? The astral dynamics are spectacular and overwhelmingly positive and pacific, befitting a moment when conflict can be resolved, fear assuaged, isolation healed, and communal co-creativity greatly favored. The main planet alignment is at the top, in the quadruple conjunction in Leo, of Moon and Sun conjunct to the minute, with the horseshoe-shaped Moon's node and Mars. Now that in U.S. Pacific time, note this, all four of these planets are in the 10th house of the Father, the profession, public identity, and organizational power. In other parts of the world, this Leo quartet is located elsewhere. In Berlin, for example, the four Leo planets and Mercury and Virgo are all in the 9th house of government and other authoritarian institutions, and of wealth and the higher communications of law, philosophy, and religion. In Beijing, significantly enough, the moment of the eclipse is on August 22nd at 2:30 a.m., and the four Leo planets are exceedingly powerful in the 2nd house of money. Back to Mount Shasta. This tremendous Leo conjunction of lunar emotion and intuition, solar intellect and clarity, the courage of Mars, the warrior on the attack, and the cohering, strengthening force of group dynamics under the North Moon's node is auspicious enough. But it's the relationship of other planets with the grand Leo conjunction that give this chart even greater power and promise. Uranus, the revolutionary and bringer of change, who looks like a letter H in Aries in the 7th house, is in a tight to-the-degree trine with the Moon and Sun, and thereby to the entire Leo conjunction, bringing to the mix the possibility that 7th house teamwork can bring surprising, even stunning new insight and inspiration to the domain of institutional power. A 120-degree trine is one of the most favorable of all angles of planetary relationship, though its force tends to be cohering and stabilizing rather than dynamic and destabilizing, as is usually the case with 180-degree oppositions and especially 90-degree squares, and often with 0-degree conjunctions. depending on the planets involved, their sign and house location, and the ease, friction, or fight of their basic relationship. A chart full of trines signals a moment of rest and concord, and that's what this chart is. Count them. Saturn in Sagittarius in the second house of money is in a tight trine to Mars in Leo, and thus to the whole Leo planet cluster, signifying the rare possibility of solid financial prudence and discipline on the part of official institutions. Venus, the lover, artist, and manifester, in Cancer in the 9th house, is in another trine to Chiron, the wounded healer, in the 5th house of creativity and play, so that this eclipse can be a time when playful, inclusive celebration can accomplish a lot more than severe, humor-challenged drudgery. Jupiter, the ruler, the magistrate, and the money, hidden in the 12th house of spirituality and intuition, dreams and empathy, secrets and shadows, and in the cooperative sign of Libra to boot, is in trine to the chart's comfort zone. The moon's south node in the 4th house of the home and the mother, perhaps showing that at the moment of this eclipse, cautious habits and traditional values may be empowered to see the world as Zeus, cloud gatherer himself does, with an all-encompassing view of everything that is possible, and with a little nerve and determination to flame out and light the way home. If this chart had only these trines, or even more of them, it might be, if anything, too placid, not driven by enough will and discomfort to attempt any change at all. But there are enough peas under the mattress and burrs under the saddle to produce some movement here. Jupiter in the 12th house is no longer in the tight square to Pluto in the 3rd that we noted 2 weeks ago at the Leo full moon of August the 7th, but is still potent enough to bring the death and regeneration of old ideas of secrecy as one of the cornerstones of power. The chart has many 60-degree sextiles, which are as positive as trines, yet proactive and forceful. Jupiter in the 12th is in sextile not only to Saturn in the 2nd, but goes in the opposite direction too, to form a tight sextile with Mars and thereby with the whole Leo planet cluster. The chart's Libra ascendant at the extreme left is in close sextile to the moon and sun, and thus to all the Leo planets. Saturn is also sextile to the south nodes in the 4th house. Pluto in the 3rd and Neptune in the 5th are in a loose sextile too. There is finally an opposition besides the moon's node opposition that is always in effect. Uranus in Aries in the 7th is opposite to the ascendant in Libra, suggesting that as individuals and communities, we're now at a point of being able to change completely the way we project our intentions into the world. The time has come to stop waiting and postponing and to make a move. This is why so many people who aim to assist the transformation of consciousness are joining global meditations and ceremonies keyed to the timing of this eclipse. One especially worthwhile focal point is the unity meditation that will be held by Cobra and Corey Good at Mount Shasta at 11:11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And this is why many other events, like the Play the Eclipse gathering that I will co-guide in Pisac, Peru, will synchronize with this timing across our respective time zones. It is time. Thanks for flying Aquarian Airlines. Get ready to see the Earth and the sky as you never have before. Keep holding that frequency. This is Captain Aquarius, doing business as Dan First, coming to you on August the 14th, 2017, from Lima, Peru.